Vladimir Putin appears to be building himself an off-ramp from this month's highway to nuclear war. Despite massive casualties and setbacks, Russia's top generals briefed their country today, saying the war is entering phase 2. We have some video of that. It was pretty stunning and just sort of how Soviet-esque this looked. They laid out the offensive against Ukraine so far as a success, pointing to Ukraine's east and the ethnically Russian areas of the Donbass, and radically changed their army's mission. Take a listen.
Мы и не планировали штурм этих городов, чтобы не допустить разрушений и минимизировать потери среди личного состава и мирного населения. И хотя такую возможность мы не исключаем, однако по мере выполнения отдельными группировками поставленных задач они решаются успешно. Наши силы и средства будут концентрироваться на главном – полном освобождении Донбасса.
A lot has changed in the last 24 hours in the east, specifically the Donbass, which the general just talked about. This is this area right around here, the eastern part of Ukraine that is ethnically Russian, rich in coal, which is two reasons that Vladimir Putin wants it. It's another reason the Russian army is doing pretty well there. They're not dealing with the same kind of partisan attacks. There is a huge Ukrainian army defensive force here that is in danger of being pinched off by the Russians. And that's where they say right there, they are going to concentrate all of their forces, all of the Russian forces. And in fact, that is what's necessary for them to be able to build and complete this land bridge all the way through here from Russia down to Crimea. There's nothing left in a lot of these cities right here. And they really acknowledge the reality today in this press conference. Their leadership has been decimated. The reality that the war didn't work out in the beginning, and now they're having to try and rethink the battle plan. In fact, this town of Kherson, which was the jumping off point for an assault on Odessa, it's the railhead out of Crimea. We understand now that the Ukrainians have pushed all the way in and are contesting Kherson. So the idea that the Russians can push any farther west just is not going to happen. Again, the momentum has changed once again. There is really no chance now for the Russians to be able to continue and push forward in anywhere but potentially here and here in the east. We'll move now down into the south. That shows you a little bit better of what Kherson looks like there and just how critical that is now that the Ukrainians have it to stop any Russian advance either north or west. We'll now move a little bit farther forward. We'll show you just how difficult it is for the Russians versus the NATO alliance supplying the Ukrainians for supplies. The Russians have to fight through all of this area to bring supplies to the front lines. This area is all held by the Ukrainians in the fields. The Russians may control the roads. The Ukrainians and their villages and their militias all use all these areas to launch assaults and ambushes. The supply lines out of Poland with U.S. and NATO equipment into Kyiv, into Odessa, and then even as far out here to the Ukrainians holding out in the east are still pretty clear. The Russians have to fight for every single piece of material they get in. Now we'll move in just a little bit farther into Kyiv. The Russians no longer control massive parts of the capital. In fact, just up here we understand there's an enormous group of Russians, about 5,000 or 8,000 troops near the airport, who are about to be encircled by the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians also have taken some key highways here, so now they have two ways to get supplies into Kyiv. We bring in Dmitri Alperovitch, former advisor to the Pentagon, founder of the Silverado Policy Accelerator, with us now. Boy, this seemed to be the moment we were all waiting for of the Russian realization.
The big question that we always had throughout this whole war was, what would Putin do when he realizes that he can no longer win the war and take over Ukraine? Well, we got the answer today, Leland, and the answer is limit your aims, focus on the Donbass region, proclaim victory, and pull back from the other areas, the areas near Kyiv and up in the north that he can defend, and declare that you've denazified Ukraine and that you've demilitarized it by destroying much of their military-industrial infrastructure.
Yeah, you think about what they said today, the war, according to Russia, intended only to liberate the Donbass, then why would you invade Kyiv? Knocked out most of Ukraine's military capacity, to be debated. Never wanted to capture major cities, not targeting civilians. Only 1,300 Russian soldiers were killed. None of those are true, but what does it tell us about Vladimir Putin's assessment of his own army that he's now willing to back down?
Well, he's clearly mad. He's mad that his initial goal of taking over the country in 2 weeks was not accomplished. He's mad at the performance of his troops. He's probably gotten finally some assessments that his aims are not achievable and he has to pull back. So he's not a happy guy. And look, he's paid a huge price for just taking that area in the Donbass. His economy is being choked off with these economic sanctions. He's not getting any sanction relief in the foreseeable future. So strategically, he is lost.
Strategically, he's lost. Tactically, he has this southern area of Ukraine and eastern area of Ukraine, a lot of which is now just rubble, especially Mariupol and some of these other cities. His economy is decimated. The common Russian refrain always was they escalate to de-escalate. Have they just not done that, or have they assessed that there's no way for them to do that?
There's no way forward. They don't have the forces to take over the country. And even if they manage to take over Kiev somehow, the person that they would install would not survive 5 seconds without the Russian troops staying there permanently. And they just don't have the capacity to do so. So that finally must have dawned on him.
All right, so we look forward. You pointed out to the sanctions. Sort of the most visible part of these sanctions has either been Russian oil, which still isn't really sanctioned, or the oligarchs' yachts, all of which have been taken. And Russia has sort of been turned into this pariah state over the past month. What do we look for in the negotiations of Putin being able to try to get some relief from this?
I don't see how he gets it, because he's not going to relinquish this area that he's conquered, Mariupol, Kherson, and other places around the Donbass region. And Zelensky is never going to do a deal where he gives up those cities. His people just would never allow him to do so. So I think we have some sort of semi-frozen conflict where fighting will continue in a limited fashion, maybe some occasional airstrikes, artillery hits, but we will not see any major offensive going forward. And the reality is that Russians excel at that frozen conflict. They have it in Moldova, in the Transnistria region. They've been supporting it in Nagorno-Karabakh, the area between Armenia and Azerbaijan, for 3 decades now, excuse me. So this is something that we can look forward to, if you will.
It's a great point that the Russians play a much longer game because Vladimir Putin's a dictator. He doesn't have anywhere near the domestic political concerns of an American president who needs things done in a matter of days as the cable news cycle develops. But Ukraine's different than the countries you laid out. They're being armed by NATO. They have the ability to counterattack. Are we to believe that there's not going to be some moment of an agreement, of a ceasefire, and these are the terms and this is the deal?
I think there might be a temporary ceasefire, a cessation of activities for a short period of time to allow both sides that have been battered and are exhausted to take a little bit of a breather. But I don't see a peace deal anytime soon. And you're absolutely right. What Putin is not realizing perhaps right now is that the Ukrainians will be rebuilt in terms of their military capacity, and they'll be rearmed with Western weapons, with a lot of Western weapons. So you can see in a year the Ukrainian army being back in force.
Yeah, and without some kind of long-term ceasefire agreement or relinquishment of territory, the Ukrainians would, I guess, have every right to go ahead and launch another offensive. Would it just not work for Zelensky to be sort of paid off by the West in some way to give up the southern part and the eastern part of the country, and Vladimir Putin keeps the sanctions stay, and then we all move on?
I don't think he can be paid off. I don't think anyone would be willing to pay him off and try to essentially force, a hero of the free world, if you will, now, who has stood up to Russia, faced Russia, and at least was able to not lose his entire country. No one's going to pressure him to give up part of his country. That's just not in the cards.
Fair enough. Putin also has to worry about his own survival now. He's certainly been weakened after doing this. The reports are that his defense minister had a heart attack. I know you view that as somewhat either coincidental or questionable. Thanks for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.